الحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه مباركا عليه كما يحب ربنا ويرضى جل جلاله وعم نواله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد المصطفى صلى الله تعالى عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، قال الله تبارك وتعالى في القرآن المجيد والفرقان الحميد: والذين آمنوا أشد حبا لله. وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم: ثلاث من كن فيه وجد منهن طعم الإيمان أن يكون الله ورسوله أحب إليه مما سواهما. رواه البخاري ومسلم. My dear respected elders, brothers, sisters, dear friends, young brothers, we're gathered here tonight, inshallah, for this discussion. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it useful for us and beneficial for us. It's actually quite easy today for people to go online and listen to a lecture. To listen to something online is very easy these days. In fact, you have full control. If you want to listen to somebody, you can make them repeat if you miss something. You can make them repeat. If they're going too slow, you can actually do it 2 times the speed and make them speak faster. And you can do it at your control. Alhamdulillah, ilm is at your control today. But there's a specific benefit in us actually coming physically together to sit and speak about something. That's something that cannot be replaced by just listening to something. Our deen has generally been transmitted through heart to heart by people sitting together. That's human beings. Humans are social beings, social creatures. They need to come together, away from the phone for a while. So let us see, inshallah, in this next hour who can avoid looking at their phone for the next 1 hour. Not to just check any updates and notifications. Inshallah, my phone is in my pocket somewhere. I'm not going to touch it. Right? So inshallah, let's see if we can do the same thing. But the main thing is that we come together. Inshallah, our hearts, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, bring them together as well. There's an experience about this which is irreplaceable through any kind of technological means. We ask Allah for the benefit of this. We want to get into some really core topics today. You know, the main reason why we are in this world. And what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our Creator, actually wants from us. That's what we want to kind of explore today. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that those who believe in Allah, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَشَدُّ حُبًّا لِلَّهِ, they are the most intense in their love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those who believe in Allah, who claim to believe in Allah, who profess to believe in Allah, they are the most intense in their love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because Iman in something can only be if you love that thing, if you're fully convinced by that thing. People become convinced by different things. Today, if you look at it, for religion, you've heard the history, you've heard the many different incidents, stories about the Sahaba, about the Prophets, and the later great people of this ummah who used to do some unusual things for the sake of their deen. They would be willing to undertake huge hardships, long journeys, and great difficulties for the sake of their deen. The reason why they do this is because of a conviction in their heart. Otherwise, you couldn't do that. Difficulties become easy when you're convinced about something. When you like something and it tastes good, you will eat more of it even though your nose is running and your eyes are watering. There's a hot food, it tastes very good, you'll be asking for tissues, but you'll be enjoying it. That is what enjoyment does to people, when you love something for the right reason. Unfortunately, the challenge today, both for Muslims and non-Muslims alike, is that there are a number of other things which want that part of our heart which is supposed to be connected to Allah, everything else is actually competing for that part of our heart. Where our heart is supposed to be connected to Allah. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said that there are three things which, if they are found in somebody, if somebody has those things, then they will be able to taste the sweetness of faith. The halawatul iman, the sweetness of faith. If these three things are found inside somebody's heart, then they'll be able to taste the sweetness of faith. If somebody is able to taste the sweetness of faith, then they will not want to find sweetness elsewhere. But if we haven't tasted the sweetness of faith yet, then we're looking for sweetness everywhere else. And that's where the Prophet ﷺ said that one of those things is that Allah and His Messenger be more beloved to him, to that person, than anybody besides Allah and His Messenger. That is basically what will give us the taste of faith, that Allah becomes the most beloved to us. Now that's a claim we're making, that Allah become close to us. How does Allah become close to us? Now let us look at something. Religious people, they are willing to undergo huge hardships for the sake of their religion, for the sake of their belief. This is what drives a human being. But today, you have a number of other things which also drive the human being and take everything of their heart. For example, I know you guys are in New Zealand, and I don't know what teams that you have and if you follow any teams, but if the British football, Manchester United, Liverpool and so on, the people who support these teams and they're willing to go to great extremes for the support of their team, they're willing to argue with people. I mean, how many of you how many of you are on Twitter? How many of you know what Twitter is, right? You know what Twitter is. Now, Twitter gives you a number of words that you can describe yourself, your profile. Right? You know, when you click on a Twitter, somebody's Twitter handle, it tells you he's this and he's that, you know, she is, you know, this is what she is, or works for IBM, and you know. I've seen some Twitter profiles, limited number of words, and the first thing that they mention there is a proud Liverpool supporter, a proud Manchester United fan. I'm like, Allahu Akbar, this is your profile. Like, this is what you identify with. Like, this is the first thing you want people to know about yourself. Because you know, when you only have a few words, and Twitter gives you limited words to write, I forget the number of words. Is it 40? Is it increased? It's still 40. So in 40 words, describe yourself. You're obviously going to choose the most important thing to you. Right? It tells us about ourselves. It tells us things about ourselves. I'm not football bashing here. Playing football is a wonderful thing. It's a game of great technique, mashallah, and we should do it. We should play it. What I just don't understand is when our children play FIFA online. Right? And they don't play outside. It's kind of crazy, like, you know, you're picking the team and you're playing online. That's what gets me going. But the point is this, once I was, I think last year, when I was in the Haram, I was in Makkah, Mukarram, Hajj time, I think it was. In the Haram, in the Matar, and I see somebody with a Manchester United bag. Right? It had a shaitan on it. Because you know, Manchester United has shaitan on it. So I just couldn't help it. I went up to the brother, I said, brother, you brought shaitan into the masjid. And he turned around to me and he was like, what are you talking about? Right? You know, you could tell by his face, I didn't understand. And he was pointing to his bag. And he got upset. And he visibly, I mean, that's what I saw, he visibly got upset that I had pointed this out. Maybe the supporters of Manchester United can campaign to say, remove the devil. This is antithesis to our faith. It's antithetical to our faith. It's not something to do with our faith. Allahu A'lam. But what I want to tell you is this. They've done studies on people who support teams. And That study shows that, the same kind of zeal, affinity, love, fanaticism that people have for religion is the same kind of mental idea that is in supporting football. That you're willing to argue with somebody, break relationships with somebody, defend your team. For what? I don't know. If they saw you, they probably won't even recognize you. Any of those team members that you love and talk about all the time. I'm not saying you guys, I'm just giving this as an example because I think it's just a good example. And you can talk about anything like this. If they ever saw a person and you've been going on about them, this. I mean, I only found out about a year ago that some of the, mashallah, some of the best footballers in the world are actually Muslim, right? Okay, that's a source of comfort, right? I only found out about a year ago. But regardless of that, if they saw you, I mean, half of them would be racist, right? Whatever they. The same thing, why would somebody wait for 24 hours, maybe 48 hours, outside an Apple store to get the new phone, to be the first person to get that phone? Why would you camp outside the shop all night, from the night before, with a blanket, right, if it's cold, just so that you could go inside and buy the first Apple phone, the new, the new one? Who's got an iPhone 10? Who's got an iPhone 10? Anybody? iPhone 11? It's a bit far away. iPhone 11. And you guys should have the iPhone 11 by now. Anyway, why would you do that for? You can buy it in 2 weeks. It's not like you don't have a phone. I really need a phone, so this is the phone I need. No, you've got a completely fine phone. The reason you want this is just, why would you want that? Just to prove to yourself there's a love here. There's a love here. And the thing is that's why I said that it's just become more difficult in this time. The shaytaniyya, right, you should call it. Taking somebody away from I'm not saying to buy an iPhone is shaytan. I'm not saying that. I'm just giving you an idea that the kind of fanaticism that people show towards a certain product, towards a certain team, that should have been reserved for something greater and higher and more beneficial. Not something which is going to get old in a year and they'll come up with a new phone and then you have to do it all over again. That's what I'm trying to say. Is psychologically you need to really look at this. What should we give our heart to? That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, ما جعل الله لرجل من قلبين في جوفه ما جعل الله لرجل من قلبين في جوفه. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasn't created two hearts in any man. And it's kind of interesting that he said rajul, man, because sometimes a woman does have two hearts. But it's very interesting that sometimes a woman does have two hearts when she's carrying a baby, so she has another heart in herself. Somebody else's heart, but she has a heart. But there's no two hearts in one place. You have to give your heart to something. You can't give it to two things fully. You can only give your heart fully to one thing. And you can deal with other things. Now look, if you just to wind up the whole iPhone issue, if you need the iPhone because it does what you want it to do, functionality, then please go and get one. Be my guest, that's fine. Nobody's saying it's haram to have an iPhone, or any phone for that matter. But to do it because you are a believer, right? They've converted you. They just haven't given you a name, that's right. There's just no name for this religion. It's just very clever. Or that football team, or work for that matter. I mean, according to, I hope this is not a boring idea, but according to organizational structures, you have a number of different types of structures. Some are what they call dictatorship structures, where they tell you to do, all the workers there, they tell them what to do, and the workers don't have any input. You're just supposed to come and do your work, and that's it. They find that that's not very successful because the motivation rate among the workers is not very strong. The motivation isn't there. Because you're just going in there, you're only working because you want to make your money, and then you're gone. The other type of structure is a messianic structure, they call it. A messianic structure is when you've got a charismatic leader. Right? Many Muslim organizations tend to be like that, where you've got a figurehead, an alim, a scholar, a charismatic orator, author, whatever it is. And the reason why that company or organization or institution works well is because they all love this man, right, this person, and he drives everybody. But that also has some shortcomings, because even if he's doing something wrong, he's made a mistake, nobody's willing to say anything because they just follow. That's what you call a messianic structure. And then you have the structures, I forget what they call, but the ones that Google uses, where it makes you feel part of the community. So it gives you food. The Google headquarters, I mean, I've been to Silicon Valley quite a few times because I was in California. So that's where they give you a lot of perks. They give you a lot of clothing, for example. They make you really feel like you're part of the environment. That really gets you going, but then that makes you work too much. Then your family and everything is left behind when you're very motivational. Then you really get into it so much that the company becomes yours even though you've got nothing to do with that company. They could fire you tomorrow. So basically they say that actually the best organization is a mixture of all of these things. Because each one of these individual organizational structures have their own problems. Sorry if I'm getting a bit boring with all this management strategy, right? But this is just to give an idea of how things work in the world. And in this last century, the kind of research that has been done through psychoanalysis, through the modern philosophers, right? Like psychoanalysis, to understand how the mind works. One of the biggest things that helps, one of the biggest things that actually, you can say, attracts a person is the nafs. And they figured this out. Right? The nafs, which is the human lower self, the greed, the desire. The psychoanalysts have actually figured this out. There's been huge research in this. And the major companies in the world, they purchase this research. They bring on the consultants. So for example, I don't know about New Zealand, but it's maybe the same. You've seen a Magnum ice cream, right? The advertisement says, pure decadence. Pure decadence. It's calling out to the inside, the nafs in you, and you feel like you want it. The picture and everything, and then the wording. Just do it. What is that? Just do it. That's what Shaitan tells you to do. Just do it. It's just about this whole liberal freedom of ideas. Do whatever you want. Another one, release yourself. Release yourself. In fact, another one, I forget what it was. Release the devil in you. It actually says that. Release the devil in you. We look at these things as totally harmless. Psychologically, this is not conspiracy theory. This is just pure research. It's not conspiracy theory. These things work. That's why these companies use these slogans. We had a cigar before called Hamlet. Right? The older people may know this. Happiness is a cigar called Hamlet. That's what the slogan was. Happiness is a cigar called Hamlet. The diamond guys, the De Beers, the South African diamond guys. A diamond is forever. These are slogans, they work on the mind. Language is very powerful. And you know the exact wording to use. Psycholinguistics this is what is used. This is the world we're living in. What's coke? What's coke? I think in Pakistan, coke had a specific, somebody told me, those who are from Pakistan, coke had a very specific, they're doing this in Urdu in Pakistan, coke is doing, they've got huge amounts of resources, funds, that they can do this. And it gets people going. So many of these things. So basically what I'm trying to say is that in the world that we live in, There is so much that competes for our attention. So many things that attract us, that occupy us, that engage us, that submerge us and don't release us. And to get away from these things and to understand the reality of these things, that's the difficulty. So that's why though we believe, we pray, but we have no pleasure in our prayer. We have no pleasure in our worship. Because our mind is constantly about acquiring the next thing. It's about acquiring the next thing. It's to do the next thing. It's to run to the next meeting, to get the next job, to get a promotion at work, to get into this university or that university. I'm not saying that these things are harmful things intrinsically speaking, it's just the way they've been made and what it does to us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants our hearts to be connected to Him. Because everything of this world is for only this world, for the 50, 60, 70 years. Basically, let's put it this way. We have to live in this world. We have to engage in this world. We can't escape it. You're going to need a car, you're going to need a home, you're going to need food, you're going to need clothing. You're going to need to do all of these things. But the way to make all of this better is to bring the akhirah into this story. The akhirah is something that wakes anybody up. There are so many people who are totally disengaged, but they saw a friend dying. You know, there's a number of people who suddenly become religious. One of the biggest factors to bring somebody closer to Allah is when they have been faced with their mortality. When they've been faced with the fact that, you know what, I am going to die one day. And death becomes imminent in front of you. You know, have you ever woken up from a nap sometime and you felt very vulnerable? You've actually started thinking, where am I going in this life? You started thinking about these things. There are certain times in life when this happens. Certain moments. Sometimes when we lose a loved one. You know, if one of our relatives or somebody passes away, somebody we love very dearly, maybe a friend is involved in a car crash, maybe we are involved in a car crash, God forbid, then suddenly we start seeing our weakness. We start suddenly seeing our problem and our vulnerability. And then we start wondering, you know, where are we? Now, at that time, people react differently. I mean, I was just mentioning recently that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this age in the Quran, وَبَلَغَ 40 سَنَةً قال رب أوزعني أن أشكر نعمتك التي أنعمت علي وعلى والدي وأن أعمل صالحا ترضاه وأصلح لي في ذريتي إني تبت إليك وإني من المسلمين. Midlife crisis. You're 40 years old, approximately 39, because when you're Gregorian 40 years old, you are already Islamically 40 years old before that, because the Islamic year is 355 days. So you become 40 before actually becoming 40. Because we generally consider our age according to our January, February, March, April, May 2018. Right? That's how we look at our birthdays. Islamically speaking though, we're faster. Right? We're actually older, it's about 38 or something, 38, 39. So when you become that age, that's when the mind matures. That's why the majority of prophets, except Isa alayhi salam and I think Yahya alayhi salam, they were given prophecy at the age of 40 because it's when the mind mentally matures. It's also the peak. It's وَبَلَغَ 40 سَنَةً. It's the peak. After that you start going down. The Prophet ﷺ said, حَصَادُ أُمَّتِي بَيْنَ السِّتِّينِ وَالسَّبْعِينَ. The reaping of the crops of my ummah is between the 60 and 70. That's why the Prophet ﷺ died at the age of 63. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh died 2 years later at the age of 63 as well. Umar radiallahu anh also died about 10 years later, 63. Uthman radiallahu anh died at 80 something. He lived a lot longer. Ali radiallahu anh also died at approximately the age of 63. Right? It's not a sunnah. I mean, when you're born at 63, you know, don't think that, you know, halas, I want to die this year. You know, that's just from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So between 60 and 70 is the reaping of the crops of this ummah. Generally, I mean, some people go over 70, they go to 80, they go to 90. I mean, we know people who are 100 years old. It's more possible. Average we're talking about. But the 40 mark is just over. If you take 70, half of 70 is 35. 40 is definitely over that halfway mark. What happens then to a lot of people is that's when they start thinking, what have I done in life? Now, if we're not guided by Allah at this point, we'll actually become worse off. That's why I've done a bit of study in what they call midlife crisis. This is what you call midlife crisis. Now, I know for a lot of you, you're still not there yet, right? And you're thinking, I don't need to know about this yet. But you do, believe me. If you know about this, you can actually pace yourself and you can actually prepare for that age so that you make the right decision and you ride the wave well, because there's going to be a wave that will come at that time, right? It's going to cause some turbulence in your life. And if you know that this is going to come, then inshallah you'll ride it well and you will get into the right, go in the right direction. There's people who look back at their life and they think that, I've been working for somebody else, so let me start a business. So they'll start a business at that age. They will want to go on big holiday. Like, let's get out of New Zealand, man. We're so far away from here. Let me go for a world tour. Let me see what the other side of the world looks like, right? People get divorced at this age. Huge number of divorces at this age because people are like, I don't need to do this anymore. And they want to get divorced. They want new romance. They want to change companies. For some people, they want to buy a motorbike, a Harley Davidson. Right? They just want to do different things, They just want to do different things. I mean, I know from my own experience, I've just gone over that age, that I had a spiritual crisis. I was like, where am I? I've got this, Allah has given me this, Allah has given me this position, Allah has, given me all of these achievements. All worldly achievements. I mean, I've got more than I could hope for. But where was I with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Where was I with Allah? And that is seriously something that bothered me. Because your life is not worth living. Because that's when you realize that I'm going to meet with Allah. But I've got all of these achievements. But what about with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That's really what matters, isn't it? Because if I die tomorrow, these achievements are gone. What is my standing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Would He love to meet me and would I love to meet Him? That is what's important. That's why the dua of the Prophet ﷺ is amazing. It is that, oh Allah, make the best, make the best of my days, my final days. Because our whole purpose should be that this year I should love Allah more than I did last year. Not that I should just love Him the same. I should love Him more this year than last year, and next year more than this year. I'll give you an example. We've all been fasting, I'm assuming, for many, many years, right? Especially the elder ones among us. We've been fasting for 5, 10, 20, 30 years. Ramadan is coming around the corner. You see, when it comes to the dunya, does anybody remember the first time they had to buy a suit, a blazer, to go for their first job interview? You came out of college or university or whatever, you had to go to look formal and you had to go and do your first interview, you had to buy a jacket, right? Do you remember that time? Does anybody remember that time? You had to buy like a suit so that you could look formal. Did you worry about getting the best suit out there, or did you just worry about any suit? You probably just like, I need any suit. Let me just go get any suit, so at least I look a bit decent and I can go. But year by year, I don't know what you shop as here, but I can tell you from England perspective, you get any suit, then it needs to be eventually you need an Armani suit, Canali suit, Giorgio Armani, Canali, whatever, right? And then it needs to be hand-stitched, Savile Row, I don't know what you guys have here. I've got a friend in New York, right? He's a very simple guy, but he used to work for this big French bank called BNP Paribas, and he left that and he started working for KPMG, big accounting firm. I have to make sure that I have something that is of a particular brand, because they will actually come and check my label. Right? Some guys, like, oh, that's such a nice shirt, and they will look at the label, and if it's not Jones Brothers or something like that, they'll start making fun. They'll come and look at your tie. Oh, this is like cheap from Pick and Save or I can say, right? And they'll think, no. Do you understand? So you need your Gucci blazer, right? You have to have these things. Slowly, in terms of the dunya, every year we become progress. We go, another example. We know what food is we like, right? We don't have too many Indian restaurants to go to anywhere, right? When you come to London, you'll see. Everybody is trying to give you a new idea of what food is all about because there are just so many cuisines in England. You guys have, what's that place called? What's your famous Indian restaurant? Paradise. And there's another one, right? Bawarchi, yeah, golden chicken bawarchi, yes. So, we become critics of food. We become critics of clothing. We know exactly what we want. You start off with a small house, then you want a bigger house, particular location. So we design all the dunya for us. But our akhirah we haven't designed yet. I give you an example, some of you will understand this. When you're in India or Pakistan or Bangladesh or any other country and you want to come to New Zealand or London, in your mind it's just like, I want to get to New Zealand thus. Where in New Zealand? I don't care where in New Zealand, I just want to be in New Zealand. बस मुझे लंदन जाना है बस. क्यों लंदन? लंदन में proper London, एक London है. There's no proper London or नकली London. It's just one London. It's just I want to get to London. I want to get to South Africa, right? I want to get to New Zealand, but I don't care where it is. The whole point is I just want to get out of where I am and I just want to go there. When it comes to the dunya in everything, we become more refined. Every year by year. When you come here afterwards, then you know exactly where you want to go. We're supposed to go to paradise. We're supposed to go to Jannah. And that is supposed to be eternal home. Not just for the next 50 years, 40 years, 30 years, or 70 or 100 years. It is supposed to be there forever. Have you ever read a brochure about paradise? Have you ever done research about paradise? What it's supposed to be and which one I want to be in? Jannatul Adn, Jannatul Na'im, Jannatul Firdaus. The Prophet is actually telling us, you want to be in Jannatul Firdaus? Fas'alullah al-Firdaus. Ask Allah for Jannatul Firdaus. It's just we have these massive discrepancies in our life. Our focus on the world is so much that we become proper connoisseurs of our food and drink and living standards. But when it comes to the hereafter, we're still doing the no-frills shop generic brand. I'll give you the example of Ramadan. When it comes to Ramadan, our routine of Ramadan, is it getting better every year? Or has it been the same for the last 5-10 years? Alhamdulillah, we fast, we get up at a particular time, we read this much Quran. If we're reading Quran, alhamdulillah, we're reading this much Quran, we're doing this Taraweeh, and this is what we're doing. Is it still the same routine, same amount of Quran reading, tahajjud, whatever, if we're doing it, that we've been doing for the last 5 years? Or are we increasing every year, that every year in Ramadan we actually feel us closer to Allah than we felt last year? So when it comes to the dunya, we're 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. And if anybody's been to Dubai, they'll know what I'm talking about. Dubai is dunya 10.0. Right? I can only stay there for like 2 days. It's in your face. It's like dunya on steroids. You know what I'm talking about. Right? If you've been to Dubai, you know what I'm talking about. It's just crazy. Like, how long can you sustain that for? It's artificial. How long are you going to sustain that for? It's artificial. You can't live like that for the rest of your life. It's not that we don't want good for our people. But good needs to be measured. SubhanAllah. Norway is a country that is a wonderful example. I've been there several times. People work hard there. They have oil. They have petrol. But they're not allowed to use the proceeds of that except in war situation, in some one other situation. That's why today Norway owns 3%, and this was like several years ago, I don't know where it is now, 3% of all public limited companies in the world, on average. That's their stock portfolio. The people there are not flashy. In fact, a bottle of water there costs £2, four New Zealand dollars, a bottle of water. More expensive than New Zealand and London. They make you work that it's managed. And some of our other brothers, they've got the money and they just can't help showing off with it. It's just really sad. It's really sad. And this is not a Muslim problem, this is just some cultural problem. If you look at Turkey, alhamdulillah, the work that they're doing is amazing. The work that Turkey is doing is amazing. We just had a recent tour of Turkey of all the major organizations. Ajib, what kind of, and Allah will help them inshallah, because Allahu fi awni al-abdi ma kana al-abdu fi awni akhi. They have let, I think, 2 or 3 million Syrians in. They've given a number of them citizenship. They've allowed them to go to school. And they don't have as much money as anybody else. But Allah gives you if you help somebody else. And everyone said the same thing. In fact, one of those big organization leaders, because one of the biggest organizations helping the Rohingya Muslims in Burma are the Turks. So I asked them, where did you get this from? Where did you get this zeal from? Is it from your leader? Is it from, is this like just something that you're just putting on show? Or is this some kind of Ottoman gene? Like some kind of immutable Ottoman gene that you want to really do this? And you know what he said? He said, tawfiq, tawfiq. You know the way the Turks say? He said, this is tawfiq from Allah. Allah has given some Muslims tawfiq. It's not that it's not. It's just we have to help ourselves to understand what it is. So, this Ramadan that's coming up, our fasting needs to be better than last Ramadan. Not that same old. It needs to be fasting 2.0 this year. Not fasting beta version of fasting. I hope you guys understand what I'm talking about. Right? I mean, we are technologically savvy. How can we focus? Well, if there's an understanding of the challenges that the modern world puts in front of us, those who are able to regulate themselves and discipline themselves, they'll be able to use the modern facilities to their benefit. But if we become submerged, overwhelmed by this, then we will destroy ourselves and we will lead an existence in this world that is devoid of any kind of spirituality, any kind of satisfaction and tranquility. That's the problem with this. I read recently a report of a girl, a teenager, who had come to counseling with her parents because they had some major problems. And the problem was this, that the girl could not, she's a 16, 17-year-old girl, she couldn't stay off her phone. Instagram. She knew deeply inside that this was harming her. And she used to feel lonely. So she used to go to Instagram to get involved with people, to get, communicate with people. But then afterwards she used to still feel bad. It wasn't giving you any satisfaction inside. None of this gives satisfaction. You know, just about, I would say, 3 to 4 months ago, maybe about 4 months ago, in South Korea, I read about this famous star of theirs, who was only about 28 years old, who died. I don't know if it was a big news. And he died at the age of about 28 or so. He was a major star, to such a degree that when you looked at all the young people who were crying at his funeral, they were literally crying at his funeral like their dad had died or something, or their mother had died. And now what the saddest thing is, that the note he left behind was that I didn't find anything in life. He is causing so many people to get excited, and they love him, but yet he's got nothing. Can you believe the kind of world we're living in? That we follow people who are empty. How many stars have committed suicide? How many stars have had drug overdoses and are using drugs? Yet they have millions of fans. They have this many Facebook supporters or followers, but they're devoid inside. Their lives are miserable. That's the world we're living in. And then our young people, they look at this and they want to do the same thing. So then they put up a photo of themselves. Our young girls and our young boys, they put up a photo of themselves. And then there's somebody that says, hey, that you look so nice. That gives you an ego boost. You know when you felt pain, unless you control it, it's going to intoxicate you. When you got people liking you, when people say, hey, that looks really nice, then you want to do something again. Now if you do the same kind of thing, it's boring. Nobody's going to say we like you again because they've already seen it before. Human gets bored quickly. So you have to do something else. And then you have to do something else. And then eventually you run out of ideas. So then you have to start revealing. Then it's about how less clothes you wear. And that's how people do this. It's just, Allah says, وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ. خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ. It's a wonderful expression. Khutuwat is the plural of khutwa. Khutwa means a footstep, a step. And khutuwat means steps. Do not follow in the footsteps of shaitan. Shaitan will never take you first and throw you into the deep end. It's always going to be steps. Do this, let the taboo disappear, right? Let it get used to it. Then things get boring, so then you do more and you do more. You take certain types of drugs. Then they get boring. You have to take more intense drugs, right? You watch certain things, they get boring. You have to watch more wilder things, more violent things, and so on and so forth. It just gets worse and worse and worse. A lot of these people who get caught doing child pornography, they started off with something much lighter, but eventually all of that got boring. So then eventually this is what gave them the hits that they needed, and now they can't stop. It's just slowly, that's what happens. That's the world. Khutuwat shaitan. And Allah is telling us instead, فَفِرُّوا إِلَى اللَّهِ. You should be running to Allah, not following the footsteps of the shaitan. Same with music. You start with a bit of music. Then you need more intense music, because that's why a music video will never show you the same scene for more than a few seconds. It has to be moving to keep you engaged, otherwise it's boring, people will turn away. And it can't be like more than 3 minutes long. You never have music that's 1 hour long. You'd be bored. It's just all psychedelic. They've worked it out how much it needs to be. This is the challenge that we're facing. Then we spoil our relationships with people. We spoil our relationships with our family members. Parents are not speaking to children. Children don't want to speak to parents because they engage somewhere else and they think their parents are too old-fashioned. They don't get it, right? They don't understand. Once my daughter, I was trying to explain something to her. And she's about 16 now, or 17 now. But this was about maybe when she was 15, maybe 2 years ago. Trying to explain something to her, right? And then I realized, you know what? She's not getting it. Her mind doesn't have the experience to be able to understand what I'm saying. She thinks of it differently. Actually, brain studies will show you, studies of the brain. There's a great book on that if you want to read it. What it shows you is that the teenage brain, right? The teenage brain, it develops in one aspect, but not in another aspect. It develops in terms of in terms of embarking on things, but in terms of looking at risks and weighing the risks according to benefit, in terms of that, it hasn't developed yet. That's why youth are willing to take more risks than over 20s. And the insurance companies know that, and that's why the most expensive insurance is from 17 to 20, right, or 21 rather, the most expensive. So I finally understood she's not going to get it. So this is the example I gave her, because I've seen her trying to explain something to her younger brother, who's at that time was about 8 years old, right? And she was trying to explain to him, and he just wasn't getting it. So I said to her, I said, just the way that you're not understanding what I'm telling you, and you think that it's senseless, right? It's unreasonable. It's the exact same thing when you were trying to explain to Yusuf and he wasn't understanding what you were trying to say, you were getting frustrated. That gave her a vista to understand what I'm talking about.
She probably still didn't understand, but at least she was able to conceive now the idea that, hey, there are things I can't understand, just like Yusuf cannot understand at his age. So the children here, the teenagers here, sometimes what your parents tell you, you don't get it, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. Remember, they've been your age before, right? Your parents are not 40 years old now or 35 years old now, and they just became 35. They were 15 and 16 and 14 and 13 before. They also did that. They may have done some stuff as well. And that's why they're probably telling you about this. They know about it. We will generally be more strict with our children than our parents were, because we are more aware of what the world is. You know, the changing of the world has only taken place in the last 20 years or 30 years. I remember when I went for Umrah the first time, and those of you who've been for Hajj or Umrah in the early 2000s, 90s, how big was the shaitan? The Jamara. Do you remember? How big was it? It was one long, there were 3 floors, but it was just one long pillar. It wasn't a wall. In the last 10, 15 years, it has become a wall, 50 times the size. Let me tell you, National Geographic, they did a photographic portfolio of the Hajj of 1954 or 53. And the pictures are online, you can see them. The Jamar, the shaitan, I'm not joking, it was probably about this size. Right? It was about this size. Probably about 6, maybe 7 foot. Small, and there's about 10, 15 people going and doing the Jamar, and there's a Coke sign next to it. So Coca-Cola's been with the shaitan for a long time. So, what I'm trying to tell you is that, the size of that Jamara in 1954, which was probably the same, I don't know when it became the long pillar when I saw it in 2001, first time. That is how it was probably for centuries. For centuries. It stayed like that for maybe 1300 centuries, that same size. In the last 60 years, it has gone from that size to the pillar and now the wall. What does that tell you? Why has it become like that? Because the world has changed. We need more of the shaitan because more people are able to go. But that just tells you the development and advancement of the world. We are living at a time that is unprecedented. Somebody who lived 100 years ago, somebody who lived 200 years ago probably had a very similar lifestyle. But somebody who lived 30 years ago, and now we've got a very different lifestyle. And we don't even know what the next 10, 15, 20 years are going to bring. We're living in some really different times. And that's why we're trying to work out, it is the responsibility of the ulama to work out how to guide people to understand this. It's just too fast. To understand how to figure this out. That look, this is taking us away. This is making us empty human beings. Not just, we're not complaining. Some of the Muslims who are complaining about this, everybody else is complaining about this. There's no meaning to life anymore, even though we have everything at our disposal. We have facilities in our house, we have various different machines to do things for us. But people aren't satisfied. Suicide rates are going up. Hardly anybody's getting married. Those who do get married, they get divorced. Families are breaking apart. It's becoming a completely godless society. And shaitan, that's where shaitan is becoming successful in this regard. That's why we have to look at this. We use technology, yes. We use the facilities. But we have to understand that our connection has to be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now, let me just talk about a few final things before we finish. Some of the ulama, they have written this. Now, this is not from hadith, but it makes a lot of sense. The human being has various different challenges, and this will give us some insight into ourselves. Everybody can introspect when I mention these 4 things and see which category we fall into, right? Saying that the human being, according to the old Unani, Ayurvedic, Hellenistic understanding of how things are made, they say that there are 4 elements that make up all of creation, right? from a modern scientific perspective, they'll have a different perspective of this, but I think this is just very interesting. Essentially, they say that there are 4 elements that make up all creation. That was, who knows the 4 elements? Water, fire, wind, and earth, right? So now look at this. فَإِنْ كَثُرَ مَاءُهُ. Now we're made up of a mixture of all of these elements. But if one of them is dominant, we're going to have a different temperament. Right? Because all of these have a particular temperament. So he says that فَإِنْ كَثُرَ مَاءُهُ فَهُوَ لَبِيبٌ. If somebody's water element is dominant more than the soil or the earth and the air and so on, then they're going to be very intelligent. They're going to be very intelligent and smart. Now, when you say intelligent and smart, it doesn't have to be positive. You know these major scam artists of the world, right, who have committed some of the greatest frauds, they have some of the best brains. If they did the right thing, they could have had big PhDs, they may have been Nobel Prize winners. In fact, you know, some of us who know everybody's history. You know, in Ghana, there's the people who know what everybody's doing and they know their history for the last 30 years and then they do door of it every few weeks as well. You know what I'm talking about? Panchat. They do door every few weeks. They know so much that I told them in India right now, I said that if you become Hafiz of the Quran, your brain is so good that you're going to become Hafiz of the Quran. If you stop focusing on everybody's matters, right, Panchat of people as they say, you're going to become Hafiz of the Quran. People have a lot of brain, they just don't use it in the right direction. So these scam artists, these big people like this, they have a lot of brain, but they just don't use it in the right way. And alhamdulillah, Allah Ta'ala has given the tawfiq of some people to use it in the right way. So if the water is dominant, you'll be very smart. Then he says, وَإِن كَثُرَ نَارُهُ فَهُوَ حَرِيصٌ. If the fire element is dominant, then the person is going to be very greedy, have a lot of desire. So in that case, they want to consume. The reason is that fire consumes everything indiscriminately. It consumes everything. Fire doesn't discriminate between anything. It just takes everything that comes in its path. So if somebody has dominant fire properties, then they just want to consume everything. Give you an example. During the time of the Tabi'een, there was a particular individual who was a bit, his water element was quite low. So he wasn't very smart. But his level of fire was very high. He was very greedy. And he was one of those guys that the children used to like to make fun of, because it was enjoyable to make fun of those people. Right? Because, you know, the way he would get bothered and run after them. But he was not clever enough to catch them. Right? So that was the problem. So there's the perfect person for children to bother. Right? I'm not saying you should go and look for somebody like that. That's what it is. So one day, all these children were bothering him, and they wouldn't leave him alone. So he said to them, he said, you know, Salim, so-and-so, he gave a name, he's giving out sweets. So go to him. You know, children, they love their sweets more than anything else. So they quickly ran in the direction of Salim. And what do you see? The children are running in that direction, and he's also running behind them. It's like, where are you going? He says, well, you know, maybe Salim is giving out sweets. You can imagine the greed that he makes up a story and then he actually starts believing in it because he's so greedy. From a personal perspective, these people, they come in, they're very greedy, they want everything their way. The third person is وَإِن كَثُرَ طِينُهُ فَهُوَ مُتَوَاضِعٌ. If a person has the earth property in his dominant, then they're going to be humble. They're going to have humility. So that's a person like the earth. And Allah loves these people because مَنْ تَوَاضَعَ لِلَّهِ رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ. Whoever is humble for the sake of Allah, Allah will raise them. Now let me clarify something here. There are some people who are just naturally humble. and shy. Right? They don't have enough desire to go and do anything. They like being walked over. That is not tawadu. That is not proper tawadu. There are some people who are introverts. They don't like to be in the public. They're very shy. Now, is that haya? Because you know in Islam we have a concept of haya. Al-haya'u shu'batun min al-iman. Haya is actually a branch of faith. So if somebody is naturally shy and they don't like to be seen, they don't like to speak in front of people, they're always very shy, always like blushing, does this mean they have haya? No. Haya is imani. And this is fitri shay. This is just natural shyness. This is not the haya for the sake of Allah. But if these people wanted haya for the sake of Allah, it'd be easy for them to have it. Because they already naturally like to be shy. But they have to connect themselves to Allah for that. And likewise with everything else. Number 4, which is left, the air. وَإِن كَثُرَ رِيحُهُ فَهُوَ مُتَكَبِّرٌ. The person whose air element is dominant, then they're going to be arrogant. When you say arrogant, imagine a football. The reason why a football, a soccer ball goes so far is because it's filled with air. It bounces around here and there. That's the same kind of person, that person is not steadfast. That person jumps around. He's quick to fly off the handle. He gets angry very quickly. Very sensitive to small things. Comes in the house and maybe the house wasn't clean and it'll fly off the handle. Right? Comes home from work and the food isn't ready yet. Now if you have low blood sugar, then maybe you've got an excuse. Because you know when you have low blood sugar, you start shaking, you've got diabetes. That's an illness, that's different. But if you're just naturally, your temperament is that when the food isn't ready, right? And you just start shouting at your wife, I've been working all day and this time and the other, you got no sabr, right? Every day the food is right, on time, but today it wasn't on time. Then that means you've got this problem. Basically what we're trying to say is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created every single human being in different proportions. And the challenge for each of us is to get it right. The Prophet ﷺ had the most perfect equilibrium in his akhlaq. His anger level was perfect. He didn't get angry for the wrong things, he only got angry for the right things. That's why he says he never got angry if he was abused himself. But he got angry when the Sharia was being violated. His desire was perfect. If somebody has too shortcoming in their desire, husband will not fulfill the rights of the wife. And the wife will not fulfill the rights of the husband in terms of, desire. Fulfilling the desire, which is one of the things of marriage. Right? If somebody has too much desire, they're going to want extra. They're going to want beyond. They're going to go into sexual vices. That's called abundant desire, over the top desire. Likewise, anger, desire, and knowledge. These things have to be in equilibrium for the person to be the perfect human being and go according to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if somebody finds that they have too much greed, or they are too shy to even do the right thing, to stand up for their rights, or a person is flying off the handle all the time, getting angry all the time, then they need to regulate this for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us is He wants from us that we do things for Him out of His love. To love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the sake of loving Him. And the way to begin to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to read more Quran with meaning. Because the Quran is very powerful. It uses various different strategies to explain and give us an understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How many people here, I want to ask a simple question. How many people here know Surah Al-Fatiha by heart? I know it's a dumb question, but please do answer me. Right? Everybody knows Surah Al-Fatiha by heart. Okay, alhamdulillah. How many of us here know the meaning of Surah Al-Fatiha? Okay, that's about 30%, 40%, 25-30%. Now that's a sad case. That's really sad. Because Surah Al-Fatiha, when we're praying, if we know what we're reading, it's a dua, it's an interaction with this, between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We start by Alhamdulillah, all praises to Allah, Lord of the world. So we start praising Him. And then we start saying, only you do we worship and only you do we seek assistance from. And then we make a dua, then Ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim, guide us to the straight path. If we understand what that means, and then Qul ya ayyuhal kafirun, Qul huwallahu ahad, Rabbil falaq, you will see that our salat will improve tremendously. So inshallah, make this your goal, that this Ramadan, which is the month of the Quran, along with your Ramadan reading, the 10 tawab for every letter, along with that, also try to get a tarjuma, a tafsir, ma'arif al-Quran, whatever, good tafsir, zirah, tafsir al-Mani, and try to at least memorize, understand what Surah Al-Fatiha, last 10 surahs of the Quran, they mean, so that inshallah our salat will become more focused. That's when we'll start loving Allah more. We'll start doing something for the right reason. And another thing we were discussing yesterday is that even in our du'as, for example, how many of us know the dua for sleeping? Most of us will know, Allahumma bismika amutu wa ahya. We read it. Again, Hindustan से मुरादाबाद से मुफ्ती सलमान साहब तशरीफ लाए. उन्होंने फरमाया कि हमारे यहाँ दुआएं पढ़ी जाती है, मांगी नहीं जाती. We read du'as like there's a spell or something. We don't ask them from Allah. Dua is supposed to be asked. That's why even now, maktabs, when you teach the children dua, we make sure that now we teach them the meaning of it. Allahumma bismika amutu wa ahya. Oh Allah, with your name, by your name, through your name, am I dying? And do I die and do I become alive? That's the last words you say. There's a barakah in that. So with every dua that you love, if you bring these few things in your life, you will see the difference. Which is to make your salat on time, but salat with an understanding. وَدَّ سَمِعَ اللَّهُ لِمَنْ حَمِدًا رَبَّنَا لَكَ الْحَمْدِ. Our Lord, for you is all praise. Subhana Rabbi al-A'la. Glorified is my Lord Most High. You're saying that in sajda. Right? You will actually feel it. And the du'as you make, you do them with meaning. You will see that you will actually start loving Allah more. And you start reading Quran and tafsir and listening to the tafsir if the ulama are doing this. You will start seeing a connection. And then you just have to add some dhikr to your life. The afdalul dhikri la ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. The dhikr of la ilaha illallah, to say it 100 times, 200, 500 times a day, is the most effective means in purifying the heart from all of these challenges that we're talking about. Because the more you take that name, the more these things will come out, Allah will enter into our hearts. And finally, two of my favorite du'as. One of them is Allahumma rzuqna hubbak. So if everybody can repeat it at least once, Allahumma rzuqna hubbak wa hubba man yanfa'una hubbuhu indak. Oh Allah, grant us your love and grant us the love of those people whose love will benefit us by you. Which means that Allah will bring for us companions and friends who will be also lovers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if we make this dua and we do these things, inshallah we will be closer to Allah. We have to start seeing the world for what it is. It's a very complicated world we're living in. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for tawfiq. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us an understanding. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين.